Hi, welcome back. So excited you guys are still here with us at DestiCon. Lots of great content this morning. Hopefully, you all just just already met Dave from our last session with Alex and Annie, the real women of vacation rentals, and I'm super excited. Just wanted to come in and be the hype man for Dave because since we've met this last couple of months, I've become a real fan of what he's doing at Rent Responsibly and how he's dedicated to the marketplace and how much destinations can learn from him. So I'm going to not do him a disservice by trying to tell his bio. I'm going to kick it over to Dave and I'm going to let him jump in and tell us all about it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Well, the feeling's mutual. We met actually through Alex and Annie, and my life has been so much better because of it. But that's not even an exaggeration. I think I've learned about DMOs through and through from you, and we'll continue on. But on this presentation, my topic at hand is how you can benefit from your short-term rental community, even more if you already are. And we've divided it into three parts. First of all, we know short-term rentals are popular. We know that there's a lot of energy. I think I come from the short-term rental space, and I really want to kind of unpack and explain not only how we got here, but also how the community is organizing, and then specific actions you can take to connect with your short-term rental community. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's actually an obsession, to be honest. And I'm obsessed with this space because I was kind of waltzed into it or stumbled into it in 2014. I became a host out of necessity. So this was my first necessity, being the mother of invention. I invented a small short-term rental business because I needed to manage one property for a short period of time. Just fell in love with the people element, right? There's so many stories of individuals like me that kind of got into it one way or another. But anyways, in 2014, Dallas, where I was at the time, only had 300 short-term rentals. It was exciting. There was barely any tools out there. And the image you see on the left side of your screen there was actually one of my listings. I got a $200 booking in December by somebody who you'll find out should remain nameless, but her name was Christina. And she ultimately had what we ended up calling mini Coachella. Was not a good thing. It was a party. I found out about this party the worst way you could possibly find out about a party, and that's through a letter from my building with a cease and desist. And again, this is 2014. I think of this as the, speaking of disruptions, this was a pretty disruptive thing to happen, and I felt awful about it. But again, necessity became the mother of invention then, and I said, I want to continue to do this, but I want to be more capable of being proactive, managing any potential nuisance issues, giving everybody around me peace of mind. This is very rare. It happens 1 in every 200 nights booked. So I ended up working with a friend to create what we called the smoke detector for noise. That was a company called NoiseAware, and you see it on the right side of your screen. So that was my kind of origin story. And through that experience and starting NoiseAware, I was able to travel all across the country and even internationally a bit. And I just realized, oh my gosh, this was 2015 to 2019. There are tens of thousands of people who are coming into this space who have the same positive intention. And there's also a whole, myriad of other operators who've been in the space for decades. And so there's this kind of amalgam of folks who are now offering hospitality. They're offering rentals in a way that had never really been is so energetic, so energized and widespread. But that's how I met my co-founder, Alexa. Alexa is a fierce lady. You can see us back to back with our Jazzy Jeff look there at a fun party that we went to. But we decided, hey, all these folks are disorganized. And when the different conversations come up and people want to hear from the short-term rental community, there's really nobody's door to knock on, so to speak. And that happened in Alexa's community of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She saw that their city started talking about short-term rentals? What are the rules going to be? Hey, we're hearing some issues. And so she decided to organize the Chapel Hill Short-Term Rental Alliance. This is before we were working together on Rent Responsibly. But I knew her then, and I was kind of following along with what she was facing. And she just said it took 40 hours to even set up the websites and the MailChimp and just get the whole thing off the ground. And she had skills to do it. And so we kind of looked at each other and said, you know what? We have tens of thousands of people who are passionate, trying to do the right thing. Can we build something that makes it easier for people like Alexa, people like myself, and everybody in between to get together and to build a community, to build education, to help inform each other? Again, I came from one nuisance issue sent me on 4 years of building a noise monitoring system and tool. And so we took all of our connections and our bright ideas together and created Rent Responsibly. So I just wanted to let you know how I journeyed to this very place with you today, and what Rent Responsibly is. So like I said, community building and education platform, but it's important to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we can help local short-term rental communities go from cradle to sustainable. That means from being completely disorganized to having a board and supported, and our platform will help them collect dues and create authentic membership experiences. And we're doing that at beginning to scale across the country doing that. So that is really the moment we're in. I kind of mentioned it in the previous session, but our mission is to empower short-term rental communities to collaborate, right? If you're adjacent, you're in a DMO, a CVB, that's part of our mission, is to collaborate and further responsible renting, right? Further the responsible renting for the benefit of people, places, and planet. And we know that's possible. We've seen. Let's get into the bulk of this presentation. I was a history major. I always think about, if you want to know where you're going, you got to know the past, right? History is prologue, past is prologue. So I believe that short-term rentals are a destination marketing story. Absolutely a destination marketing story. So I don't know if we got folks in the chat, but I want to ask a question. Does anybody know what was the first vacation rental? Excuse me, vacation home? And I won't wait for any chat just because it is obvious. It's on the screen. It was actually the Palace of Versailles. Louis XIV in the mid 1600s, a king, somebody who liked nice things, very gilded. You can see the gold gate there. He wanted the biggest, most fantastic vacation home ever, and he built it. It's the Palace of Versailles. Large gardens. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. But this was the first vacation home in the 1600s. But it really, you know, the normal people like you and I weren't going to that vacation home. But our first short-term rental experience might have been if we were around in the 1600s in colonial America. Just when you traveled, that was the primary option, was to stay with somebody else in colonial America, right? So you would lodge with other patriots if you're traveling, you know, trying to navigate for the Revolutionary War, or there really wasn't a ton of travel, but when you did, you stayed with other people there. And I think that actually helped bind the United States together, because you really got to know folks from other colonies, and it was just this real authentic experience, right? Because you're walking into somebody's home. Well, one of these travelers, you may know him as our first president, was George Washington. He actually was one of the most well-traveled people in all of early America. And it became kind of a phenomenon that if George Washington stayed there, people would start marketing that George Washington had stayed there. So he was the original influencer, was he not? So he built this kind of phenomenon of George Washington slept here. And that became a marketing tool, right? So just the fact that he lodged somewhere was something notable. And in 1943, the Warner Brothers company created a film called George Washington Slept Here. I don't know if anybody's seen this movie. I definitely haven't. I'm not really a 1943 flick guy. So I looked up the plot on Wikipedia like any good millennial. And it was basically an HGTV plot. Manhattan couple dreams of going to a rural place. They're looking for a place to buy. They find a property. It's marketed as George Washington slept here, and they buy it. It's a lemon. All sorts of discoveries that they shouldn't have done it. Apparently, the movie's good enough to get 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. But let's move on. The point is, that's how we get to vacation rentals. There was an allure of traveling and staying in a home and going elsewhere. But it wasn't until after World War II that the American population, the baby boomers, my parents' generation, started creating enough wealth to own a second home. That was really the big Americana moment where the American dream starts to get blown out. And when you have vacation homes and people there part of the year, you start to have vacation renting. But it's in its nascency. They're advertising in newspapers and catalogs. And it really was that way for 40 years until in 1995, a gentleman by the name of Dave Krauss, which is hilarious to me, a very similar sounding name to mine, started a company called Vacation Rentals by Owner in Breckenridge just to put his rental on this new thing, the internet. So you got the dial-up modems and people are searching around. I don't know if you guys remember how tough it was to navigate, but it really was just online classified ads, no transactions. You're calling the owner, you're sending the check. And it was, again, that was vacation rentals in their early days until Web 2.0. This is when STRs really was born. And I'm just using these operative terms. They're interchangeable generally. But here's where this gets to really map where we are today. In 2010, only 8% of the US travelers were using short-term rentals. Very niche. Not when I was getting into it, but by 2015, that's right when I came up, the 8% went to 32%. A 400% increase in 5 years. And now we have the next generation, 80+% have already stayed in short-term rentals. So generationally, we go from kind of a niche opportunity and alternative accommodation to now everybody has either stayed there or considers it, generally speaking. And the next generation, when I get pushed out as the bulge generation, this is their preferred accommodation type for 3 nights or 3 or more people. So this actual graph to me represents the biggest change in consumer demand for a travel or accommodation option since the Ford Model T, right? That's 100 years ago. That's exactly the curve that the automobile did in popularity. And the statistician who put this all together said it was the most significant change he'd ever seen in his entire life. So we really are talking about the biggest change in travel and tourism. And then comes COVID. 250% additional boost in popularity because it was the perfect lodging option for the pandemic. I mean, it was private, the stays were going to be longer. You had a kitchen, drive-to markets were accessible, relief from quarantine. I mean, the idea that we can think about the world today, even before COVID, as far as the way people are perceiving the industry, is tough because this is driving a lot of what the narrative is. And that's that short-term rentals are no longer alternative, right? Short-term rentals are now a different kind of stay than the traditional lodging options, but they're complementary, right? And we're starting to understand from a data perspective, from a traveler profile perspective, from a marketing perspective, what does this mean? And just knowing that we're early, we're still letting some of this dust settle from 2020 and 2021 is really important. But I think we have a window 5 to 7 years to really get ahead of it and harness this opportunity of short-term rentals. So we're going to go into the traveler, the economic impact, and the marketing impact. All right, let's talk about the travelers. So if you're marketing to this traveler, they're very interested in non-traditional destinations. I combed through the 2022 Vrbo Trends report, and some numbers just stuck out to me. So I'm going to share some of them with you. Cincinnati, Ohio saw a 125% increase in demand in 2021. There's just a massive demand for these types of non-traditional destinations. And Cincinnati is a good sized city, all the way down, secondary, tertiary, and on down. The rural areas are impacted even more just because it's a new accommodation option and bringing by percentage a higher number of people to the area. And these are families and larger group stays. So on that Verbo report, they said 40% increase in demand for pet-friendly vacation homes just last year. Think about that. You are now bringing more than just a couple or a couple couples to a property. You're bringing your whole family and your dog and your kids. And so 43% of parents more likely to let their kids skip school for vacation. I felt that stat right here because I think kids nowadays, if parents are live, work, play, and now you have school from anywhere with Wi-Fi, of course the teachers don't love that, but it really is a new concept. And how are we marketing? How are we making these destinations friendlier for people who are going to stay longer, right? 44% of families said they're likely to work remotely and extend their stay. So that's the new kind of traveler. Of course, we have the traditional travelers that are going to the major destination markets, but I know this audience that's in the room right now might need to think a little bit differently about how we're marketing to those travelers. Also, let's talk about the economic impact. Short-term rentals obviously contribute to the local economy. You're paying into the hosts. The hosts are oftentimes local, but the traveler is also, that part of that money goes to local occupancy taxes. Growing number of voluntary collection agreements, VCAs, with cities, and this will become table stakes, right? If the HOT and the TOT is not being collected now, it just has to be collected. It's got to get easier, and we're on a march to get there. I did look up my personal contribution of HOT over the 5 or 6 years that I hosted, and it was $27,053. I saw that. I was like, I'm very proud of that. I am proud that I contributed $27,000 through my activity to the city's HOT coffers. And that is something that, we're seeing these larger numbers come in, and we're driving more people into ensuring that those taxes do get paid. Also, the visitors spend while in market, because there's no F&B on site. You have STR guests spending $75 to $125 a day. Next, the geographies, right? Thinking within the market. The graph you can kind of see in the background there is a graph that shows how many properties are within range of traditional accommodation options. And the math, I'll do it for you, is about 35% of all properties are out of range or over a mile away from the existing hotel options, but that goes up to 57% for rural locations. So that's small towns, metros, interstate areas. You just have this long tail of properties that are really spreading. If you've ever seen a graph of short-term rentals on a map, it looks kind of like a buckshot and spreads out. That's a really big impact. And also, so you think about the new communities that have an opportunity to participate in tourism. There's thousands and thousands of communities with over 100 short-term rental listings that never had any sense for having a substantial short-term rental community or operation or impact. But it's spreading geographically, like I said, new cities and then locally diffused. And this is the last piece, the flexible capacity for flexible demand. I had an operation that kind of rolled. I was moving from one property to another, never really built a large portfolio, but it totaled 10 properties that I ended up offering on short-term rental platforms at one point or another. Only one of them is still in the short-term rental market, meaning these properties come on and they go off. It's very fluid, but it can respond to demand. So as we think about how vacation rentals and short-term rentals can contribute to the local tourism economy, is you think about it as an expandable capacitator for more travel. So engaging with your short-term rental community actually brings your ability to communicate and telegraph, hey, well, we actually are going to have these major events next year and the following, and managers can make sure that perhaps they're blocking off owner nights or creating the capacity to lodge more people. It is so important because it's very fluid and flexible, and we think of the market as getting more dynamic that way. I think that's one that to keep an eye on, is just thinking about how can you add capacity when all the hotels or other traditional options are full. This is really your option. All right, fun one here. The marketing impact. I feel like the best phrase I ever heard was from a friend of mine named Mark Hostovsky from Minoan, and he said that short-term rentals, vacation rentals are four-walled influencers, right? These are Instagram micro influencers, and the owners, hosts, and managers, they're also on social platforms. So you have this amplification effect just because they're very photogenic and very, pushing the message out through all the channels to find guests. And there's a lot of guests that go and then they'll follow the property that they actually stayed at or follow the host. You'll start to see these niches emerge that are really, really interesting. And knowing what niches your destination has is really kind of a cool power move, because you can start to see how those operators and how those properties are marketing themselves. They're describing your town, your destination, and they're also able to spread the visitation over the calendar, right? 12 months of the year, you're going to have your seasonality, but some of these properties are just full all year. And even better, if you can work with the vacation rental community as a whole to build demand in parts of the calendar that are low season. For example, I was in Dallas. Anybody who's been to Dallas in the summer knows it is, for good reason, not the popular travel season. It's like 200 degrees. But I got to see who was coming to town in the summer. And there's programs like the Dallas Summer Musical. So we'd have groups of actors come and stay. There were corporate relocations. And because summer is when school's out, you had a lot of families coming and looking for relocation. And they'd stay a week or 2 weeks looking for a home and leave. These are pretty big movements. And then lastly, on the international traveler side, international travelers love vacation rentals. They're actually more accustomed to them in short-term rentals than the culture we have here. But when the winter hemisphere is the opposite of our summer in Australia, for example, you get some really fun Australians coming to Dallas in the summer who want to experience cowboy culture, and they show up and they look like an Australian, and then they leave with their cowboy hat on, and they're really engaging in the the culture in a way that I think bringing this international flavor out is really a huge marketing opportunity. Hope all that makes sense. We're going to steer a little bit back to what we're doing at Rent Responsibly. And this is, again, how, if you're sitting there, how do I get in touch with the vacation rental, the short-term rental community? Well, this is part of what I wanted to go through, but I also want to show you why it's a win-win-win. Right, you will benefit, the community of vacation rental, short-term rental operators will benefit, but also the broader community will benefit, because we're very transparent and honest here. There are plenty of things to fix and things to work on. This is, again, back to that Ford Model T, the rules and the tools and the education that are going to make all this work really well over the next 5 or 6 years are not yet there, but us getting connected, and it is how we see eye to eye and educate the short-term vacation rental community about what they need to do. And then from the city perspective, from the DMO perspective, how can we add value there? So at the end of 2021, early 2022, Rent Responsibly put together the State of the Short-Term Rental Community report. We partnered with the College of Charleston. And the College of Charleston, we had a professor named Brumby McLeod who went and interviewed 27 local government staff and actually some DMO folks, and asked them questions about what is working, what is not working, what do you need from the vacation rental, short-term rental community. And then we also did a large-scale countrywide survey to ask our community, the short-term rental community, similar questions, but also to understand who the demographics are, what are their goals, why did they get into vacation rentals, short-term rentals, and ultimately similar questions, what's missing? So these are the results. From phase one, we realized that the local folks in City Hall or the DMOs, they really did want to work with the short-term rental community. That was an overarching sentiment is, look, we want to work, but we need collaboration and compliance. Can you help us with collaboration? Can you help us find these people? We don't have time in the day. Can you help us with compliance? If you can help, please do. We need to get people into the systems that are there. We all have heard these party house narratives, like what is the vacation rental community, the short-term rental community doing about that? Those are the questions that I heard. And I've been obsessed with this space. I think I said it earlier, obsessed with trying to improve this space. And then lastly is with enforcement. So how do we, when there are, drunk drivers on the road, how do we get them off the road? These are all part and parcel of the mission that we have at Rent Responsibly, right? To empower the local communities. So on the short-term rental side, on the industry side, we realize that the businesses and the small individual owners, and there are larger managers in most major markets, but generally speaking, there's always smaller businesses. And then depending on the market that you're in, there tend to be small businesses and individuals. And those folks, managing less than 10 homes or a few homes, are going to be harder to find. But if we get them all into a community, a lot easier to communicate with. And then you have that people power, and the knock-on effects are all there. It's a network effect. Also, the reliance on short-term rental income. I think folks either think, oh, these people are all in, it's all day, every day, or, this is just a small piece of their economic puzzle. How big could it be if it were to go away? How many people would be affected, right? It's actually right there in the middle. The individuals take in about a third of their income from short-term rentals. And then as you get more into the professional manager class and owner managers, it's up in the 50-60 range. And then if you're a professional manager, it's 100%, it's your full-time job. I've actually worn all the hats. I know that it matters, and the economic impact is important. Therefore, people will have buy-in, right? They're going to want to be positive contributors. And then lastly, communication. How do people get their communication? It is really difficult this day and age, and it's getting better to communicate to the short-term rental community en masse, because they get their information from 8 different major channels. Right. I don't know which one of these pops out to you, but the ones that popped out to me are social media, right? They're going to find short-term rental folks on social media. You're also going to find them in their local short-term rental communities if there are one. But then also City Hall has a lot of conduits to get the information out. So are we working with City Hall, the DMO, and the short-term rental community? How do we bring these parts together? And I believe that good communication and good education is our way to that very bright, prosperous space where all of the rules and the barriers to entry are corrected, and folks that are thriving and driving the professionalism, driving the narrative, celebrating their communities, which is, folks are just doing it in silos. When we can do that together, it's when we can all communicate together. All right, taking a breath here. How we doing? I'm going to take a sip. So the STR communities are rapidly organizing. When I got into this space, 2015, 2014, thereabouts, there were about 6 or 7 identifiable local short-term rental alliances or community groups. There are over 70 now. So we have seen this massive organization effort across the country. I want to spotlight Arizona. Arizona is a state where there is a huge level of tourism. It's one of the largest drivers of their economy. And in 2020, when I started Rent Responsibly with Alexa, there was a community group that was forming. So we teamed up with them, and they ended up being called Arizonans for Responsible Tourism. But everybody in this picture that you see right now had never met until 2020, 2021. And very, very quickly, they have grown their statewide group, AZRT, Arizonans for Responsible Tourism, to over 2,500, not only hosts, but small business owners, service providers. They've built a board, they've incorporated, they've created a trade association, and now they're building education. So they built 15 good standing guides. That's how do you get into compliance? How do you make sure you're checking all the right boxes? And now they're building Super Bowl education campaigns, which we're helping and supporting them to do. We have a lot of partners that Rent Responsibly. So we're doing that with Verbo and GovOS, driving these folks into a position where they're being respected. They're connected with virtually every local government in their state. And now the local government comes to them for answers when they have questions. So let's talk about how they're doing that, because I think this is when you're looking from the DMO perspective, there's a lot of tools and a lot of support for the hosting community that they're very hungry to get their hands on. And I think these are emblematic of the way that people are just creating when there is a vacuum. So building webinars for the whole host community to be able to bridge the gap and communicate in what do you need to foster good neighbor relations? What is the 101 education? You might be doing 8 of 10, but what are those 2 that you're not doing? Those are the types of tools that are on the shelf now and being widely distributed. Next is correcting the communication issue. With 8 major channels, you got to flood them all, right? So it's an omni-channel education campaign. And so we do lots of Zoom webinars, lots of live and in person. We're pushing things out through social. The cities are pushing the same messages. So just knowing that these activities are happening is really important as you get your strategy or your communication campaign down to your local short-term rental operators. There are these communication channels forming. So speaking of how to connect with your short-term rental community, this is an area I've thought about. I hadn't thought about it much until Jen asked me to present here today. But I was thinking, if I'm a DMO, how would I go about this? So first, I think if you can connect with the local professional short-term rental managers, they're going to have a website. If you Google your destination and vacation rental manager, start sorting through, they're very good at advertising and finding people looking for that. So just think about how they would want to be discovered. And the ones that pop up, the ones that seem to have the largest portfolios, those are going to be the ones to start with, but they know each other, believe me. So depending on your destination, you may or may not have many managers with websites, but your city hall, if there's any vacation rental program, you will be able to ask somebody at City Hall. They're going to have some familiarity with who comes in, who's calling in with the questions. It's usually the proactive people that are going to be the larger presence in your community, and also the best folks, similar to Lauren in the last session, who seems to have energy for days when it comes to getting engaged. And those are the folks I think that'll help you go the furthest, the fastest. Also looking online, again, searching on the news tab, right? I think if you were in the other session, I mentioned this, but the folks that are getting their voice out, and they're very proud of their destinations. I was proud of what I was doing. And so they're going to be proud in different ways, but also proud on social. So they're going to celebrate your destination. They're going to very creatively market your destination. And if you look into their actual listing profiles, you'll have all these ways they're talking about the neighborhoods or different activities or events. Like they're basically destination marketers for one property. And I think you find a lot of value in what they're creating and the content that they're creating as well. And lastly, this is kind of an ask of DMOs at this point, or whomever is thinking about getting in contact with the hosting community, and that's to invite hosts into your world. I've had the chance to talk to a couple people in the DMO space, and I realize there's kind of a bond, or maybe a DNA link between the host DNA, right? The core of hospitality is humanity. You have to like people. You have to want to engage with people. And I think that these folks in the short-term rental space are committing themselves to short-term rentals and hospitality in a way that maybe they didn't expect to, but having that invitation to actually connect, it means a lot. And it also creates that win-win-win, right? Because at some point you might want to be familiar. Having that point of contact is really, really important. And also you have a lot to offer those folks, and they have a lot to offer you, right? So if you have itineraries, right, 7 days in your destination, or calendars of events, or neighborhood guides, the host community can get those out. They can get those further. They can amplify that message. Actually, Jen Barbie told me a story of how when she was in Colorado Springs recently, she goes into her vacation rental and finds that on the iPad, there was the actual Visitors Bureau website. So there was literally that direct link between what the Visitors Bureau wants people to know when they, are thinking about coming to the town or when they're there. And it's literally on the wall. It's on the iPad in the unit. So that's the kind of value I think that when we can connect. All right, we're going to round it out here to a little prediction. You saw that 8% in 2010. So about 8% of people were traveling in short-term rentals in 2010. That was kind of when I think, the last days of it being this like, okay, are there horses and there's buggies? Like, how is this all going to play out? I think it's very clear that there will always be all types of accommodations, but the disruptive nature the disruptive nature of short-term rentals, or at least as they were perceived in the early part of the last decade and all the way up to present, has really changed. And I think by 2027, about 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to have all of the cars and all of the moving parts working hand in glove. There's going to be a world where you know how to get on the ramp and you know how to get off the ramp. And if you're swerving and you're not a good driver, you're definitely going to get pulled. And if you're consistently a bad driver, so to speak, you will get your license pulled. And I think at that rate, the elevation of the short-term rental community, the short-term rental operation, the short-term rental operators, that's what we're trying to strive for. So as the leader of Rent Responsibly, I'm passionate about this opportunity to elevate and bring the short-term rental operators into the fold, into the flow of the automobiles, if you will, that are already there, the systems. And I think DMOs and CVBs, different city hall functions, like this is a really big opportunity to harness, right? If the wind is blowing in a prevailing direction, the goal is not to fight the wind, it's to actually harness it and get to ultimately the destination. That's ultimately the goal of Rent Responsibly. And I believe the future is very bright when we do that. And there's win-win-wins all over the place. So that's it. I'm right on the nose at almost 45 minutes. I would love any questions if you have them. It's been an absolute pleasure to share some of my obsession with you. And Jen, I see you there on stage with me.
Hey, Dave. Actually, I've got a couple of questions for you. First off, I need to know where this party house is and how I get there.
Well, it's long gone. You can come to a party at my house because I'm as a guy who started a noise monitoring company and now Rent Responsibly, I hate to say my parties are pretty boring at this point, but I did have the title of International Party Pooper at one point, and I was kind of proud of that.
I love that. I love it. Right. And I wanted to ask you, coming off of, how DMOs can get more involved and invite STRs into their world. So one thing I think people would like to hear is, if you've got, in terms of market share, if you've got the regular hotels with so much market share and the short-term rentals may not still have caught up in specific destinations as much as it has globally. What kind of advice would you give a DMO leader to talk to their city leadership or their government leadership on why it's important to keep and fold in short-term rentals into their marketing communication?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, you got to follow consumer demand. I think the relevance of vacation rentals, and not just all of them, right? There are some that are outstanding and some managers that are outstanding, but I think elevating the ones that are leading is really important, and pointing to, the fact that there are really remarkable things that different neighborhoods, for example, that might not experience tourism on a day-to-day basis. Now there's an opportunity to fold them, whole neighborhoods into the destination marketing and growth of the economic impact. So I think you got to think about the traveler first, and then how and where can you promote and direct economic benefits. I think those are really, really important things for anybody in any city seat.
Those are great points. Those are great points. And just coming off of that, then, how do you see, or have you seen trends where it's changed in terms of meetings in a destination? Are they consuming and staying in short-term rentals more often than you've seen in the past?
Great question. And I think that is an opportunity where, when a DMO or somebody who deals in events, and they're more integrated with the supply side, you can actually influence, hey, make sure that that this date, next year, we're going to have a ton of people coming in, and some of them may want to have a work offsite after, or they may want to have a group stay, outside of the actual convention center. A great element of that, or kind of anecdote, or was in Nashville when they started. I think it was Music City Convention Center. They built it, but the hotel infrastructure wasn't there yet. So they were very reliant on even the capacity expansion. And now, the capacity expands and it's flexible. So I think that's part of where, different strokes for different folks. I tend to like to stay in the hotel when I'm at a conference because it's just so convenient. But if I'm going with a group of teammates, we might get a rental so we can stay longer and do more in town after.
Yeah, I see that splitting, and or actually having been for a while, where to a big conference, people want to stay a day and play. They may bring their families, so some of that may be kind of split up. So I think it's important for DMOs and meeting planners to hear about and get familiar with their short-term rental product for that reason.
Totally. I'll add one thing too, is that, people stay longer. It's like the idea that you can extend the value of every individual traveler, and just know that that's an option. Maybe the parents are going to the conference, and then their family comes, and then they get a vacation home, but they're in the market, right? It's just a layup. It's low hanging fruit.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna quit video bombing your stage and let you get back at it. I just had those questions I wanted to make sure that we covered.
No, I appreciate it. I think, unless there are other Q&As, I'm clicking through here. I think we're pretty good. I tried to deliver, Jen. I hope the value is there. At the end of the day, got to think 5 years out. Got to think. I think, Jen, you said, if you're not during the pandemic, is no time to let up on marketing, because you're actually creating the future you want in 5 years. And I think that's what's ultimately going on right now, is the short-term rental community is creating the future that we all want in 5 years. And let us know what we can do to help at Rent Responsibly connect you with your local short-term rental community.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Great session today. How do people get in touch with you? How do they find the famous Dave Krauss?
Well, if I'm famous, then they should know. But I'll leave them. I'll put the screen share back up. But my email is david@rentresponsibly.org, and should pop back up there. You can see my email. Feel free to phone me. Whatever you need, we can hopefully help.
Great. Wonderful. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for all your time, Dave.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
And everybody, remember that we're going into networking soon. We might see Dave in the back end there if you want to meet other people. The networking session should be starting momentarily and happen until our next main stage, which is going on at noon Central Time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.